remember we had the conversation about gangs of New York.
Yes.
So, and we didn't get a chance to talk about it on the last show. So, just a quick background, honey. The FBA mob came for me the day before Thanksgiving because I didn't appreciate the fact that Tariq Nasheed went public with his disagreements with Professor Small. And a lot of people didn't like what Professor Small said because he said that this FBA movement probably has some people who are being paid by the government, to disrupt or, like COINTELPRO. And a lot of movements, even though FBA is not organizations, but even a lot of organizations, such as, for instance, the Black Panther, had all types of agents in it. That's what every organization, the government tries to plant agents in organization to disband, disrupt, or to promote whatever propaganda. So when he made the comment, and he wasn't calling Tariq Nasheed an agent, he was just saying it could be some people who within this FBA movement can be government agents or whatever. And I have to agree with him. That was his perspective, his opinion. Anyway, all of the FBA cult people went after Professor Small, trying to discredit him because you disagree. And now, and then it's the whole thing of delineation.
That's because we have too much. That's because we have too many sissified minds that aren't into logic, reason, rationality, objectivity, and dispassionate analysis. They are emotive. That's what I'm talking about. That is part of the process of the feminization of the country. It should be a yin yang or yin yang balance between male and female, not where one particular aspect of character associated with some gender circumstances is supposed to dominate. It just doesn't work that well.
So let me just set the stage for it real quick, because I understand the concept of delineating, especially when we're talking about the Census Bureau having our own separate box from Black immigrants for the purpose of, counting who's who, and for the purpose of reparations, restitutions that is owed to Black Americans. Now, I just heard in the state of California, it was a law, and the governor approved it, SB 15, to where it was a form of delineation of counting Black Americans separate from Black immigrants, right? But delineation for me is an action for the purpose of reparations and restitution.
Well, what we were talking about when we talked about gangs of New York is
now it's just like this animosity with Black immigrants who come over here, and their animosity or their ignorance towards Black Americans, and now FBA call them tethers and stuff like that. So it's like this battle online.
Yeah, but look, is there any difference between the battles that the Germans had with or against the French and vice versa, or the French had against the English and vice versa, or the Vikings coming out of Norway, Sweden, and Denmark had against the rest of the Europe when they were kicking ass? By the way, do you know why 13 is an unlucky number?
Why?
It's got to do with this. 13 was a very lucky number for Vikings. So if it was a lucky day for Vikings, it was a very bad day for everybody else. You were getting your ass kicked. So that's why 13 is looked at as an unlucky number, because your enemies, some super white folk over here from the far north, were kicking your ass. So is that to say that the combat that's been going on for several thousand years between Germanic folk and French folk and, uh, you know, the far north and the Mediterranean area. This is supposed to be going on. But the thing we were talking about on Gangs in New York is the immigrants were being greeted by some very hostile people, but the
The
ones that were showing,
Mayflower whites, the
yeah,
Mayflower
the
whites.
whites that were getting treated badly were being treated badly by other whites who just got here before they did. So, in other words, what is that to say about human nature? That's xenophobia, the fear or distaste for the different. So here you got some white people attacking some other white people. It's no different than some black folk attacking other black folks. So get over it. It's just the way things work in the human sphere of influence on the planet. So it's not a good thing, but stop getting all freaked out about it.
Well, people feel as though if you don't agree with their ideology, you know, then they're gonna cancel you. Let's cancel him. Let's kick this person to the curb. But first of all, I say you have no power to cancel anybody. YouTube could cancel because this is this is their and they want to cancel you to kick you off their platform. They can, right? Then you go to somebody else's platform. My point with that is ownership. If you own something, then you have the power to cancel. If you don't own nothing, you don't have no power. And they got mad.
And stop trying to be sensitive because you ain't got your shit together. You know, essentially, that's what it is.
So I want to speak to real quick the collective of Black America. We're at the bottom. We've been at the bottom for a very long time. We're at the bottom. And it's lack of ownership.
You know, here's one thing. Some groups, if you're part of the group, you're presumed to have competence in what the group does. You have on a U.S. Marine Corps uniform with a lot of stripes, or you have on an Air Force uniform and you've got the right insignia of rank on your shoulders, and you have the wings that show that you're a pilot. You're assumed to be in each instance a badass, all right? You're in the Army and you got the parachute on and you can wear the airborne patch. You're supposed to be a badass, you know. That means you're a member of the club, you're presumed to be all right. Now, the problem is that there are other folk who, because of the club that they are perceived to belong to, they are presumed to not be all right until they prove things differently. Now, America will accept black folk when they prove that they have it, like Jackie Robinson, Muhammad Ali, Joe Louis, uh, Willie Mays, LeBron, Magic Johnson, uh, Michael Jordan. They tend to be athletes, but in athletic events, the excellence and the competence is easy enough to demonstrate. They will accept you, America will accept you, black, brown, red, yellow, or otherwise, if you demonstrate competence. If you're white, you tend to be presumed to be all right until proven differently. You're yellow, you're presumed to be all right until proven differently. Uh, you're brown, maybe. You're red, you're a real live badass, but you're looked at as something of a savage. And if you're black, you were a slave in your immediate ancestry, so nobody has respect for the fact that you had to be freed. So you can presume that they don't respect you because of that until you show that by your own individual prowess, it's something you are deserving of some kind of inclusion in the big group that is presumed to be competent.
So here's the thing with that. because after slavery, yes, we were freed. A lot of black men enlisted in the Union Army to fight for that
Yeah.
freedom.
One
Black,
third of the Union Army at the end of the Civil War was black. If it
yeah.
hadn't been for those black volunteers, probably the war would have been lost.
And then World War One, World War Two, Vietnam, and every war that we had, black men signed up, participated in droves, made history, broke a lot of racial lines and taught and Jim Crow laws, right? And Black America has done a lot after slavery, post slavery, to change America, especially when it comes to civil rights, when it comes to immigration, and created a pathway for the outsiders to come in. So I want to bring back Gangs of New
But
York.
let me put something else too. To give you a classic illustration, Native Americans, Indians, the red man. In order to be a chief, you had to count coup, meaning you had to be able to say, I struck a blow, and it has to be demonstrated and acknowledged. Well, interestingly enough, it's 1940. It's about 50 years, which is the length of time I've been in Memphis since the frontier closed down. And in order to be a chief in some of the tribes, you had to count coups. So, how did the red men deal with this? They joined the U.S. Army and they volunteered for the most dangerous assignments and they got the medals. And when they came back in the tribal councils, it was acknowledged that they counted coup. They were brave and they showed what was necessary for a chief. And interestingly enough, like a lot of societies, you don't have to necessarily demonstrate this courage and bravery and physical prowess on behalf of your own people. You just have to demonstrate it wherever you find the opportunity.
Right.
Gangs in New York.
So just real quick, going back to Gangs of New York, and I want to compare and contrast to where we've seen in the movie Gangs of New York and in real life when the Irish, the white immigrants that were coming over here via Ellis Island or what have you. And you see the Irish community today throughout the decades, centuries, of course, that they were given at some point incentives, right, to definitely separate from not working with Black Americans, but to have some type of economic uplift. When you look at the police department, you look at the fire department, they are heavily operated by Irish men, Irish descent. And that wasn't just by coincidence. So they were given some type of, what is that word? Intangibles. They were given tangibles to have an economic uplift and stronghold of a community here. And the same thing is kind of happening when we look at Black immigrants, even though they really came over here in droves by way of Black America's fighting to change the Naturalization Act after the Civil Rights Act was passed. But they too are given tangibles, to have some type of economic uplift. And so the Black Americans are saying, you know what? Okay, cool. But you come here, you look down on us, you may have an attitude, or just be ignorant to American history altogether. And also, which is true, they are literally told going through the immigration process when they have to literally go through the office when they fly in here, don't deal with or do business with or really associate or assimilate with Black America. They are told that.
Back
And
in the 1950s, I had a paper route, and there was what used to be a motel that had been converted into a series of apartments. And I well remember they had a sign there on the place that they had never removed. It said, no colored and no Irish allowed. Now, here's the interesting thing. I mentioned this to you before. The plantation model was developed in Ireland to use against the Irish. The whole situation on the plantation, the overseers, the semi slavery that started things back in their mid to late mid 17th century in the 1600s developed in Ireland. What wound up being very interesting to me was when I started studying it. Most Black Americans who have white ancestry, as revealed by their DNA, if they take the test, the ancestry tends to come from two places that you wouldn't think of. It's not so much English, Anglo Saxon, as it is Irish, and from the Iberian Peninsula, which is Spain. So that I find interesting. And as a matter of fact, Irish were declared non-white up until a joint act of Congress in 1876 that declared that henceforth they would be considered white people.
And I think that was done for the purpose of political power for white people and having more population, more
What the
numbers.
act says specifically is in recognition for their heroism and courage as displayed for the Union Army and also for the Confederate Army. So nobody had opposition to them because they were some of the baddest on the battlefields. They had the Irish Brigade and stuff like that, where they would suffer 30, 40, 50, 60% casualties and rebuild and come back and do it again. It's just like they
But
had
they were,
wrought iron balls.
like you said, but it got to a point. So then they were allowed to be white, which means they continue to be a step above Black Americans.
Well, you know why they were perceived to be that? Black Americans fought, and anybody that dealt with Black American soldiers in the Civil War wound up having respect for them. But what Notre Dame, the university, what is their emblem? The Fighting Irishman. He wants to duke it out. The Fighting Irish. Irish were known for being badasses on a battlefield. It was a culture of fighting things out. And that's always been respected. They name places and trains after Indians, Native Americans, Amerins. We get Martin Luther King Boulevard and Booker T. Washington High School.
Well, we could have badasses, we could have things named after our badasses. We have a lot of badasses, but again, America always had a problem with a Black badass, especially a Black man.
Yeah, and now they
So
want to make it a
always
Black female. Never a
right.
Black male, always a Black female.
This goes back to centuries here. So again, let's just bring it forward. So now when we have foundational Black Americans, this movement or what have you,
You got a lot of sweet boys around, but which Black men are supposed to be role models for Black boys in the United States today?
you.
Thank you. Other than me and a select group of athletes, who? Diddy, the rap artist, and we know Diddy was a freak. He and his freak girlfriend, they like to swallow cum. Just think about that. The ones that are on the big screen at the movie house. And when you see them, you don't need air conditioning because those limp wrists, flap those hands around. It's like being where there's a big fan going on, blowing air.
And that's the thing is no, there's no real role model because it should be the dad. So I say this to where, and there's no real guidance, which is why it is so easy to have this, I'm calling it online, noise of people thinking that they could cancel someone because you didn't like what they said, to whereas the focus needs to be tangibles for our specific group. Delineation means an action. What are you fighting for? What are you asking for? Where's the organization? Where's the plan for that, right? And this is not, listen, everybody lives on all part in different parts of this nation here. But again, are you helping to get certain things done and improve certain things where you live at in your local community? And a lot of people are not. See, this is all online talking. Yeah, we need to delineate, we need to do that. But in your real life, you're not doing that. There are real organizations in New York and California, in the South that are really doing the works locally, statewide, and then they're pushing for federal policies as well. I'm not talking about them. I'm just talking about a lot of people get online and the disrespect coming from Black Americans dissing and disrespecting other Black Americans because you disagree with what they said and you want to call it disrespect.
Yeah, and see, here's another thing too. I studied when I was with this DC think tank as an intern some literature on microfilm in the Library of Congress. We call the things the slave pamphlets. And from 1708, I think, was 1706 was the earliest something in there. William Lynch, he used to publish these pamphlets on how to raise slaves for fun and profit all the way up to the start of the Civil War. There was a consistency in there of always work through your mammies, not your senior male slaves. And also, unfortunately, there was this thing of using the mammies to impart a slave culture to their children and grandchildren so that they would make themselves good slaves by what they ideated upon, by what they were conditioned to accept, by what they were conditioned to expect, by what they were conditioned to do in terms of aspirations. So what you see today looks like exactly what these slave pamphlets were trying to put into the Negro culture before the Civil War so that the slaves would make good slaves of themselves. William Lynch was famously known for revealing that you raised Negro slaves precisely as you raised horses. Now, I had an episode of horse raising on a ranch I had through my ex-wife who was trying to raise them. And there was this unique thing that was exactly like Lynch pointed out. If you let the horse mothers train their offspring, they would quasi-domesticate those young foals for you, so you didn't have as much problem making them saddle-broken horses and obedient horses versus what happens if you wean the horse quickly from the mother and you tried to raise the horse without the mother being around. Lynch said that you should let the slave mother raise her children to be slaves for you, and all you had to do was put the finishing touches on because the slave mothers would do this, and over the generations, this would become part of the Negro culture. And you're seeing it today. We have a lot of Black female politicians, Negro female politicians, who have essentially been good third floor bed wenches who are trying to move on up to being good mammies.